Welcome and good morning. This is the Storm Report, and today I have a friend of mine, Kate Rogers. She's joining us in the storm shelter to have a conversation. Kate is the Chief Operating Officer at Beta Bay Properties. Hi, Kate. Welcome.
Hi, Chip. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's great. It's my pleasure. It's always good to talk to you again. Why don't you give us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. As you mentioned, I'm the COO for Beta Bay Properties. Beta Bay is a general contractor based in the Safety Harbor area of Tampa, Florida. We
Hmm.
specialize in self-storage, car washes, that retail construction segment. We do a lot of gas stations, fuel stations as well. And we are licensed in about 14 different states. So while we predominantly focus on the Southeast, we will do anything basically if you draw a line from Texas up to Virginia. We are licensed and will work in anything southeast of that. I've been with the company for about 12 years, 13 years now. I kind of came up through the accounting track, which, in my opinion, is the best track to come up through. It kind of gives you that bird's eye view into all different aspects of a business, all different aspects of a company. And so I came up again through the accounting side, and I've been working with the operations team for about 4 or 5 years now.
That's great. And one thing I've noticed over the past few months is you have been more visible on LinkedIn and social media, uh, really talking more about the construction business and women in construction. And can you talk a little bit more about that? I just want to get the concept of, hey, when did this idea come up? Because I think it's a great idea, because I do think the industry needs more of this. And I just wanted to get the thoughts behind it.
Yeah. So it's definitely a little bit outside of my comfort zone. So I always think it's good to push yourself, get yourself out there a little bit more, and do things that make you uncomfortable. So I've been working on that. That was actually a goal of mine for 2024. And really, when it comes to women in construction, and really women in any industry that's male dominated, we don't have a lot of role models. We don't
Mhm.
have a lot of people that we can look up to and say, hey, I'm like them. Here's what I can do in my life to potentially live up to their standard or follow in their footsteps. And while I think it's talked about, I don't think that it's talked about enough. And I think that there's kind of a stigma around it to an extent as well within the industry. So, while I'm trying to kind of put myself out there a little bit more and be in that uncomfortable kind of state, I'm hoping that it'll allow some additional interactions to happen between other females in construction, or even in any male dominated industry. And we can kind of all start working together a little bit and sharing experiences. So we feel like we have, someone to lock arms with while we're going on this journey.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, the thing I would add too is, I think a lot of times, especially in work, we have to get beyond the male female and really think of each other as peers. And, that's because really what we are, we're working together. We all have a common goal when we come to the office every day. And construction is a little different because it's more manual than what I do, push paper around. But no, that's great. And I'm glad to see it. And anybody watching this, you should subscribe to her LinkedIn profile and see the messages that she's delivering. So you mentioned you've been at Beta Bay for, I forgot, how many years now?
12 going on 13.
13. So what is it that you enjoy most about what you do? What you
Yeah, so I think what I've always found interesting about construction, it wasn't something I intended to get into. Like I said, I came the accounting track. So I have like a degree in accounting and I have a degree in psychology. So nowhere near the construction industry. But as I was kind of becoming a little bit more acquainted with the industry, what I think is fascinating about it is there are a lot of complex problems that have to be solved pretty
Mhm.
much every day in this industry. And when I say complex, what I think makes them complex is there's not always one right answer. There's, a lot of different solutions to one problem. And really, what you need to do in order to solve that is to strategize and think through as many of those solutions as you can, and then just kind of pick one and move forward with it. So there's a component of really that dynamic problem solving that I think just keeps you on your toes. There's never a dull moment. You're always having to learn something new. You're always getting to interact with different individuals that share different perspectives. And because of that, you're just able to really grow your own critical thinking skills that you can apply to other aspects of your life. Because now, not every problem feels as complex as the ones that you're solving every day. And that's what I think is so interesting about construction. There's so many different stakeholders in the process. There's so much more that goes into it than I think people realize. They just kind of see like a building being constructed on the side of the road, and they're like, oh, that's kind of cool. But they don't realize just how many people, how many different industries are involved with that, from lending to insurance to the actual, tradesmen out there working with their hands. Really every aspect is involved. And I just think that that's so interesting. So it's really kept my attention for all of that time.
Well, and the other thing too about especially what you all do as a general contractor, it's the planning and it's the timing, and you have to make sure that one trade gets in at the right window and before the next trade comes in, because if one is late or is taking too long, it kind of stacks up and it delays the project. And it's like holding real estate. If you hold on to it too long, it costs more money, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly. For both parties, for all parties.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So the clients will be like, well, yeah, the longer this duration goes, the more interest carry I have. And then we as the GC say, yeah, well, the longer we're on this job, the more money we're spending on general conditions to keep it an active job site. So
yeah.
nobody is incentivized to make that schedule duration longer. But when you're dealing with material suppliers and you're dealing with humans, you're dealing with trying to facilitate this process, things happen, right? And those are the complex problems we're talking about, right? You write it out on a paper. It seems so clear cut. This duration is going to be 5 days. I'm going to stack it with this duration that's going to be 10 days. Therefore, it's going to be 15 days. But then you get a weather delay in there. You get somebody that's sick. You get an inspection that, is a day or two late. You get a couple of variables, and suddenly that 15 days is 18 days. And you've got to figure out how to massage that within the schedule. And at the end of the day, I think what I try to remind everybody is we're still dealing with humans all day, every day. Right? They're not widgets. We can't control these aspects. And that's, again, what makes it so dynamic and interesting. And I think that's kind of where that psychology degree that I got, it kind of comes into play sometimes, because I can, really just try and resonate with that in these situations. So it really is an interesting industry in that way.
Yeah, it's more than swinging a hammer. It's managing people, it's managing timelines, and managing expectations, which
Exactly.
that's key for any business.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So one thing you've been very successful in your career. What is something that some advice you'd offer to somebody to be successful?
Yeah. So, I think kind of like we were, mentioning, it really in any industry, what it comes down to is interacting with others and being a good team player, and really learning how to, communicate with others. And so I think, one thing that I think we're all still working on, but is definitely a value to continue to work for to really be successful, is to learn how to be detailed in your communication, but still concise.
Yeah.
So how can you be both detailed and concise, right? Because I think that allows others to understand what you're trying to communicate. And the more that they can understand what you're trying to communicate and they can actually retain it and understand it, they'll be able to not only help you solve problems, but take that information out into their world or out into their scope and implement it. So often I hear, yes, let's make sure we're all good communicators. But sometimes for people, that means over communication. And sometimes when you over communicate, the details get lost in your attempt to embellish, right? You're trying so hard to create a story and to create a dialogue. And then by the time you get to the end of it, everyone's like, well, what were you asking me to do? Like, can you be more specific of what you exactly wanted me to do? Right. And so I think that from a communication style standpoint, I'm always encouraging others to be detailed and specific, but also try and consolidate it as much as possible. Like 3 bullet points max of what you're trying to say. Opening, closing, 3 bullet points, something of that nature. And I think the more we do that as a society, the faster we can go. And so that really comes down to that communication piece.
It does, especially in today's business, because what I find is, especially with the way we communicate, everyone's got a cell phone, everyone has their email on their phone. And I feel like there's an expectation that if I send an email to somebody or they send an email to me, that if they don't get a response in 2 or 3 hours, they're irritated.
Yeah.
And, and that goes to the point of setting expectations. And, I try to mentor people internally about, look, yeah, you may not have the answer or know the response, but at least acknowledge it because of the times that we're in. And, I've never had anyone come to me and say, hey, you contacted me too many times about this issue. It's always like, hey, how come you didn't give me a heads up? Or how come I didn't know all of the information? So
Right. Yeah.
being
We've
very
actually made
transparent
that.
helps too. Yeah.
We've made that one of our core values at Beta Bay. We call it the
Yeah.
sundown guarantee. And what that basically means is exactly what you just said. Communicate before the sun goes down. Even if you don't have the answer, just acknowledge, hey, I got your question. I'm working on it. I'll get back to you tomorrow. Because it makes all of us feel better just knowing that we were heard and knowing it's not getting lost in translation or lost in our inbox. Fully agree. I think in the world of technology we have now, everyone knows you heard that ding. Everyone knows you saw that text. And they just don't want you to miss it, And so I think that over communication is really helpful. And then it comes back to too, like, because a lot of us communicate via text message, you're trying to find that balance between texting and code and also making sure that everybody understands what you're trying to say, right? So when you say, are we meeting there at 9:30? Well, where's there? What does that mean? Let's meet at this restaurant at 11:30. Sound good, right? Just that added detail, but still being concise, just cuts down on the back and forth that has to happen to make sure we're on the same page. So just taking that extra second to make sure that you're really, again, detailed and concise at the same time.
No, that's a great point. Yeah, especially with the way business moves so fastly today. So I always ask this question, and it's the big one that I always ask everyone. So what was the biggest storm in your life, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, so I had to think on this one. And I think, mine kind of happened within one time frame. And it kind of like ended with what I think most people would say is their storm right now. So in that duration for me was 2019, like July 2019 into March of 2020, which we all know what happened in March of 2020.
Yeah.
But for me personally, from both the personal and professional standpoint, so I was pregnant with my first child in beginning of July 2019. We were moving into our current building here at Beta Bay. We were going from a small, 6,000 square foot building where we had employees stacked up in offices and hallways and just trying to make it work, moving into this brand new building, about 10,000 square feet, 2 floors, just, or I was moving an entire company over. Again, pregnant with my first child. And then as soon as we moved into this building, our building caught fire. The day before everybody was supposed to be moving in, it was hit by a lightning strike, if you can believe it, and caught fire. So we're here. We just moved in. There was water damage everywhere. My brand new, beautiful office was just a mess. We had to work through that. We had to file insurance claims, all those fun things that happen with that. We were dealing with some difficult projects at that same time as well. So it was just a really kind of trying time. And then to top it all off, my son was born in February 2020. And then March 2020 is when COVID hit and the world just stopped, right? So I was coming back into the office trying to figure out what we're going to do, what job sites had to shut down, what are the different municipalities in different states, how are they handling this, et cetera. And so during that time, there was just, it felt like I was being like hit from every direction, right? But it was a really good lesson in something that I have always kind of maintained, which is that you just got to show up. You got to take it one day at a time. And no matter what's going on, you just have to show up. Because the truth is, if you don't show up that day just because you don't feel like it, the problems don't go away. They're still there and they're just going to compound and they're just going to become bigger because you delayed showing up and trying to solve them. So that whole kind of adage of like, how do you eat an elephant one day at a time? I really learned and implemented that lesson during that time of every day you just show up, you make the best decision that you can, but the goal is you show up no matter what, even when you're uncomfortable, even when you're stressed out, even when you're tired, even when it's not going how you want it to go, you got to be there to do the work. And if you don't show up, you can't do the work. So it was a really interesting time, but it's really something that I look back on quite often is like, you got through that, you can get through just about anything.
So how did you keep yourself sane through all of that? There must have been something besides coming to the office, but.
Yeah, I think it was just kind of that, this will be a really good story once we get through it. Like kind of trying to, begin with the end in mind of, okay, in 10 years, I'm going to look back and I'm going to have a lot of really good stories from this time. because time is fleeting. It goes very quickly. And at the end of the day, a week, a month, a year goes very fast. So if you just can't, as much as you're going to live in the present, I think you also have to realize that very quickly the present is going to become the past.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting if you look back now on that time frame. You mentioned March of 2020. Construction was considered an essential business, so you guys just kept going.
Yeah.
Insurance, they're like, yeah, you guys are essential, but you don't have to go to your office. But I think everyone had the mindset. I don't know about what you did, but I think a lot of people I spoke with thought, hey, this is a 2-week vacation.
Yeah.
We're going to hang out at home for 2 weeks, watch some movies, have happy hour every day at 4 o'clock, and then everything goes right back to normal business in 2 weeks. But not so crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we were hoping for that, and we were very fortunate that construction was considered essential. But for a while there, we weren't sure what was going to happen. We were kind of monitoring that. And then again, because we're in so many different states, every state was handling it a little bit differently. And every state, we had to wait to see if every state was going to consider it essential and what that was going to look like. Plus, the clients are concerned. Everyone's going to their contract to figure things out. And then really for us, the fallout of that was more dramatic than that experience in the fact that we ended up with price escalations because things couldn't be shipped from other areas. We ended up with availability issues. And so really 2022, which would be the fallout from what happened in 2020, was really more of our kind of like whirlwind effect. But it all stemmed from kind of that chaotic stress of what is happening in March of 2020, and just the unknown, trying to kind of navigate through the unknown and deal with team members and things that are worried about it as well. Because even though we're essential, and so we kept the office open during that time, we still wanted to be respectful of the team members who were concerned and wanted to work from home and things like that. So there's just a lot to navigate as a business owner during that time.
Well, and I think the key to what you're just saying is the unknown, because, people get uncomfortable with uncertainty. And that's, like you said, your employees, your clients, even internally, you're thinking about how are we going to get labor, materials for these projects? How many of these projects that we have slated, are they going to go? Are they going to start? And that's a lot of uncertainty, and it causes a lot of consternation, within businesses and with people alone. So,
agreed. And that's where you just got to show up and do the
just
best
show up. Yeah.
Show up and do the best you can.
I'm going to take that nugget and I'm going to start using that. You just got to show up.
You just got to show up. You got to be in the room to be a part of it.
Another good nugget. I like it.
Yeah.
So that's great. Well, Kate, I really appreciate you coming and talking with me today. I learned a lot, and I thought it's great to hear about, your background and what you've been able to accomplish over at Bay to Bay. I do see a lot of your projects going up around, so it's nice to hear about the expansion in the Southeast and your professional growth, and your moving out of your comfort zone with your new strategy on LinkedIn. I think is awesome. So keep it up.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, Chip.
Thanks.